In addition to being a longtime foreign correspondent and eventually editor-in-chief of the Globe and Mail and Report on Business, as well as his current day job as Senior VP in the Office of the CEO at the Royal Bank, who is also an extremely supportive member of ours here at the CCBC. John is also the author of a new book titled Planet Canada: How Our Expats Are Shaping the Future. Over a career traveling the world and meeting some of our most notable Canucks abroad, John has woven a story of what he calls our 11th province, Canadians across the world making a world of difference. And while generally proud of their roots in the Dominion, they are often found to be an asset somewhat deactivated and feel disconnected from their home base. I'm going to do my best to give John maximum airtime here over the course of our session, as I know that time is gonna fly by. But before I turn it over to the man of the hour here, I just want to note that we do have a Q&A option at the bottom of your screen. So while I may not be able to weave in all of your suggestions, please do post some of your questions in that Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. I'm sure you're all very well acquainted with this system by now. Well, listen, John, thank you so much for being with us tonight. I'm thrilled to have you. It's an honor, and I hope we might start with a very basic question of just maybe you can give us a bit of background on the rationale of this book. As I was reading it, it became very apparent that you'd been writing it for years before you really started putting words to the page. Can you talk a little bit about the genesis of Planet Canada?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Noah, and thanks everyone for joining the call. Sorry we can't be together in person. And congratulations to CCBC on a 40-year achievement. That's really impressive, and I'm sure we'll get into questions and discussion about the value of these sorts of organizations, which the book touches on. Yeah, no, I think as with most books, you're never sure when the exact genesis is. But I lived overseas in the 1990s as a foreign correspondent for the Globe and Mail. 7.5 years based in New Delhi, traveled all over Asia and Africa and the Middle East. And during that time, I was always struck by meeting Canadians kind of in the unlikeliest of places doing really incredible things for the most part, some scoundrels that I got to write about, but for the most part, people who were not newsworthy, but were really impressive and adding to Canada's place in the world. And I parked that idea away. I thought, okay, that's something I didn't really appreciate about my country, our country, until I lived overseas. And then moving back, 9/11 hits. As the years go by after 9/11, the collective Canadian psyche changed, and it wasn't Canada. This was true in most countries in the world. Security became more paramount. Our notions of citizenship started to change, and our notions of globalization and the so-called globalists started to change. And this really, exploded with the critiques of Michael Ignatieff as just visiting. But that was just, to me, just representative of this mind shift change from the 90s, when we were kind of celebrated for being a world traveler or someone who would take on the world, to 2010, suddenly, you're betraying your country, you're leaving, and maybe we need to kind of tighten the border even a little bit to people coming and going. And at that time, I thought this is really unstrategic of Canada not to appreciate the value of people, to not just for them, but to us as a country. And so after I left the Globe in 2014, I thought this would be an interesting book, and that became the real journey. Then the hard part began of researching and writing. But that was the journey to the real effort.
Well, it's as an expat today, it certainly resonated, you alluded very, very briefly to that. A Canadian backpack, the way you start the book in the introduction, even commenting on that classic Canadian flag sewn onto people's backpacks as they go out. And in your years of research, both direct and indirect, I guess, on this, can you tell us a little bit about some of the commonalities, whether they be strengths or weaknesses that you learned about Canadians outside of our borders?
I'm glad you picked up on the backpack reference, because for those who have not read the book, the introduction, in the introduction, I describe a scene in the Canadian Museum of Civilization in Hull, which I just stumbled upon right at the end of kind of the walkthrough tour. There's a backpack in a plexiglass case. I thought that says so much about our country, that has become this national symbol, so much as to be worth putting in a plexiglass case. And I was a backpacker in the 1980s, as probably most of you were. And yeah, I had a Canadian flag stitched on my backpack, and I used to stay in hostels or campgrounds and meet other people and say, oh, you're Canadian, you got a flag on your back. No, I'm actually, from California, or I'm German, but I put the Canadian flag on because everyone likes Canadians. And we laugh at that as a people, and think, yeah, oh shucks, we're the nice kid out there. And that really hit me in the research, that we kind of collectively kind of accept that we're the nice kind of little brother or little sister to the world. And that's okay. You get away with a lot of things in life when you're the youngest or the little sibling, but we're also way more than that. And what struck me in my research was how many Canadians, and there's a document in the book, this is a population of 2 to 3 million, and I've used several data sets to affirm that, that are doing really incredible things, and your organization is full of them and connected to many. And I always asked, when I interviewed Canadians, wherever, they could be in business, they could be in human rights, they could be in diplomacy or entertainment or media. I always asked, what keeps you Canadian, or what makes you Canadian, especially those who have been away longer. And and the answer wasn't we're nice, and it wasn't hockey, and it wasn't Tim Hortons. So hockey, Tim Hortons, and being nice. Actually, very few people said those are the things that I associate with my Canadianness. And there was a kind of a good range of answers, which I try to capture with a select few in the book. But it came down to what some people might call mutual accommodation, and what I describe as our ability to bridge difference. And that may seem kind of like some mushy concept, like, yeah, what value does that have? And the more Canadians I interviewed, in as I said, in all walks of life, I realized that is not only a defining trait, like the flag on our backpack, but that is our secret sauce, or our superpower, if you will, for a lot of expats. And I profile people who rose to senior levels of multinational corporations or to international organizations, who said, yeah, I realized after time I was the person who everyone else would turn to bridge differences. I was the former executive from Adidas who said I was the person who was able to get the Germans and the French to work together when Adidas and Solomon merged, or another banker at Deutsche Bank in London who said, I was the one who could get the Americans, the Brits, and the Japanese through the financial crisis to work together. And we may say, oh yeah, that's nice, we're the nice people. I really try to stress in the book, we've got to stop being apologetic or sheepish about this. This is really a superpower for us individually. I stress this to university students, make sure you sell this to the world. But it's one of our strengths, it's one of our hidden assets as a country, that we need to be much more confident in selling to the world. It's kind of like our IP for the 2020s, when coming out of this pandemic, it's that kind of bridge building is going to be needed and valued even more than it was going into the crisis.
Yeah, well, there's so much power in those networks. And the other executive quote that really struck me in the book was the executive chairman of Google, talking about how if you could drop Google into Canada, it would basically fit in perfectly, or like that it's essentially a microcosm of Canada, and that everybody was sort of it's all about inclusivity and diversity, and and so this sort of cacophony of talents there. I mean, it was so great to read about all of these wonderful people around the world that have so much respect for us, and yet as you're reading the book, you feel there's an undertone of something else there, right? And I really appreciated that. But I want to move a little bit towards talking about China. We only have so much time here tonight, and I know that there's a lot to cover, but at the CCBC we tend to engage on China. And last night we'd had a quick chat, and we talked very briefly about it, but I wanted to flesh it out a little bit. We talked about a kind of an antithetical viewpoint on your take on expats in the book, and from the perspective of Canadians that have gone abroad and that are obviously, some of them are paying a price for it, right? And then, of course, we know who we're talking about here, but I wondered if you might comment a little bit about your thinking on that generally, and if you have any responses to that. You said it hadn't come up very often, but I imagine it's something that you've thought about. And then, so further to that, as many of us on the call tonight are sitting in Beijing or in mainland China, and in this current Canada-China state of affairs, where government to government wise is not good, obviously. I'm wondering, maybe you can talk a little bit about what are some of the roles that you see our Canadians on the ground here, outside of the government, playing to kind of keep the tea hot, so to speak. We at CCBC really have always played, or at least we believe we've played a role in that. When things are not so good at the G2G level, we try to keep things going at B2B.
Yeah, that's a great question, and let me answer it in two parts, because I'm glad you picked up on the Google reference, and I'll speak first to that because it connects with the second point. So I spent time for the book at the Googleplex in Mountain View, and was stunned by the number of Canadians there, and just walking around the campus or being in workrooms or meetings. People say, "Oh, he's Canadian, she's Canadian. You got to meet them; they're Canadians." And it was right through the organization. And it was Eric Schmidt who said, yeah, if Google were a country, it would be Canada. And some people bristle at that reference, saying, wait, Google is kind of one of those kind of evil big tech companies, and how can you equate it with Canada? And I think that, without defending Google, because it's coming to grips with a number of issues, as are all big tech companies, it is really a diverse and inclusive place in the way that Canada is as well. And you see that in its operations, as people from everywhere. And it's the Canadians who are often the connectors in the organization, right up through the ranks. And one of the things that really hit me in my interviews with Google executives, including a woman named Shona Brown, who was one of the senior executives in the early 2000s when it was kind of accelerating in growth. And she's now a very senior and respected person in American business circles. We as a country never reached out to those people to say, how can you help us? How can we help you? And what a missed opportunity that we have hundreds, if not thousands, of Canadians in a company like Google who could be, this isn't kind of a fifth column viewpoint. It's an open view of building those networks, of connecting with Canadians who are part of bigger platforms, bigger organizations, or bigger countries in different parts of the world, who can come at Canadian interests from a different perspective. So let me take that to China, and these are completely different situations. I don't want to suggest they're not, and I also don't want to let pass the concerns that you've referenced, that certainly many of us here in Canada, most of us here in Canada, I dare say, are deeply concerned about and find is unacceptable. We need to, not just for those cases, but for our values in the world, which is part of what Planet Canada gets at, need to ensure that our values, our approach is respected and defended. One of the ways of doing that is through people-to-people networks. And I've gained a much better appreciation of this in my time in India, when I would go back and forth to Pakistan. And this is, these are two countries that were on the brink of nuclear war. I was one of the rare people who was able to cross the border and had a lot of friends in Pakistan, a huge number of friends in India. And many of them were part of what was called a track to diplomacy. They were academics, scientists, business people, even entertainers, who would go on people exchanges, or at least invest in the ties between countries. And this isn't something India and Pakistan invented. The US and USSR did this during the Cold War. And it may seem superficial. I got to see up close how valuable it was, that when people are talking, there's less likelihood of fighting. And when prominent people, well-connected people are talking, that has an influence, because that influential scientist in Pakistan is probably connected to, maybe even related to, a senior person in government. And when they're having dinner or whatever at a family event, is going to say, you know what, I was talking to so-and-so in India, and it diffuses the tension. It maintains a relationship. Well, governments go at it, which is entirely reasonable, and governments should go at it to defend their rights, to try to find peaceful solutions to their differences. But that does not negate or block. In fact, it enhances the need for those people-to-people dialogues. And we have an opportunity with our expat networks to take that to an even higher level, using Canadians in different countries, in different walks of life, to help continue to advance the Canadian conversation. Because you and folks on this call have networks, have relationships that are going to endure, regardless of who's in government, regardless of the how things are resolved or unresolved over the years, and we need that. As I would argue, as a people, we need that network. But network sounds anodyne. It's the conversations, it's the relationships that networks lead to that is so necessary.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And, we see it every day here, especially in the Canadian companies that are invested in China. The seniority of the relationships that are held between, like, the chief representative of a company that's based here, whether it be a financial institution or a natural resources company. Their connections at senior government and business levels are amazingly transcendent of the actual issues that we're facing so heavily in the media and in our conversations every day. It's almost like at some level or another, it stops existing, and it's strange. But you're absolutely right that we need to use these networks to both underpin that or build the foundation of a way forward out of this, because this too shall pass, as we say. I wondered if you, again on China, there was a fabulous passage in the book where I learned a little bit of alternative history, I guess you might say, about Canadians in China. And I don't want to give too much away, but I think it's fascinating, and I hope you might be able to tell us a little bit about what you learned, and spare no details.
Yeah, no, additional history, I would say, hopefully not alternative history.
That's better.
But I wanted to give a sense in the book of Canada's history of expatriation, of Canadians leaving Canada, which goes back a couple of hundred years. This is not a new phenomenon. It didn't start with the so-called brain drain, and let's get to that term, which I don't like. In the 80s and 90s, Canadians have been leaving for as long as there's been a Canada. We had huge waves of Canadians going to the U.S. After the U.S. Civil War, and so there's a chapter in the book that looks at this history, because I think it informs who we are as a global people. But while Canadians were going to the U.S., Canadians created Hollywood. Canadians were at the creation of Broadway in the early 1900s. It's really quite amazing to see the movement. Canadian business people set up some of America's great companies by moving to the U.S. But while that was going on, there were also Canadians going to China in big numbers as missionaries. And there was a huge flow, largely out of the University of Toronto, Victoria College, for any Vic alum on the call, and it was through the Methodist Church largely. But what I found, and it was to Western China, principally Chengdu, and one of the things I learned in my research, talking to historians, reading a lot of historical books, including the diaries of some of those Canadians who were in China in the late 1800s, early 1900s. One of the things I came to appreciate was how different Canadians were, even in 1900, especially from the Americans and the Brits. And the American and British missionaries kind of ran the coastal centers. And they effectively said, that hard to reach kind of back and beyond place in Western China, why don't you Canadians, you go there? And it was Canadians who literally had to travel 1,000 miles upriver by pole boat to set up missions, schools, and hospitals. But that was just the beginning, because what was really, really transformative for Canada and our place in the world was that while the rest of the missionaries were doing classic foreign mission work of like, we will teach you to be like us, the Canadians created what we today call capacity building. And they said, we shouldn't be the doctors here. We need to train the Chinese population how to be healthcare workers, not just doctors, because that takes a lot of time, but we'll do that, but to do first aid, equivalent of first aid out in the countryside. We need to teach the teachers, which now is kind of standard. This is 100 years ago. There was a great Canadian, George McKay, who went to Formosa, now Taiwan, and became a legend by setting up the first girls' school there. And so, like, we have to educate the girls as well as the boys, and then teach the teachers. And it just became this powerful force. So he's now a legend there. But in China, a lot of the roots of the rural healthcare system, because the notion of rural health outposts, secondary and tertiary health centers, again, standard fare by the 1950s. In 1910, controversial. It was Canadians who helped create that system. It was Canadians who helped create the education system that became the foundation for a very successful Chinese education system after the revolution. And a lot of this history has been lost because the Canadians in Chengdu, because of proximity, not because of ideology, were closer to the nationalists than the communists. The Bethune story, everyone in China knows the Bethune story, but there were, I would argue, more influential Canadians like Bob McClure, and many who were born in China, the children of missionaries, grew up in China, stayed in China until they were kicked out at the revolution, who laid this foundation. And I think that's such an important part of our shared history that Canadians need to appreciate. I think this is inspiring for young Canadians to know that 100 years ago, Canadians were doing this sort of thing, and you can be out there in the world doing very different things, but with the same purpose of wanting to help build a more inclusive and just world. And that's one of the many values that Planet Canada can continue to build.
Yeah. No, I thought that was just fascinating, and unfortunately, a bit of a lost history, right? And sadly, it's one that I hope we can figure out ways to better tell. As a Canadian living over here, it was a bit embarrassing actually that I'd only learned about these very key figures in the early history of Canada-China relations after 15 years of traveling to and from. And I guess it strikes me as something that I really think that we need to start to leverage a bit more. However much good it's worth, we'll see. But on that last note, where you started to talk about, these were obviously very young people, and they were going way out on a limb. What do you think? What have you pull boat, upriver? What do you think are some of the ways that have you learned in any way, like what we can do to spur a relatively I don't want to say sedentary, but just not a people that are really rushing to jump on a plane and go and live abroad. Is there anything that we can do to get young people moving on this?
Yeah, well, I hope that the book accomplishes anything it is to inspire people to jump on a plane When I get to talk to university audiences about the book, I stress, like, just leave. It will be good for you and great for Canada. And if you come back, fantastic. You'll get better whatever you are, because you really start to value international experience. One of the sadder parts of doing this book has been for me hearing from a range of expats who have moved back to Canada and said, no one values the time I spent abroad. There's a senior person in government who contacted me after the book came out. He read it and said, I saw myself in the book. I'd lived and worked in Asia, in Tokyo. And when I came back, I thought, I'm ready to do all sorts of things. And in all my job interviews, people said, well, yeah, we're just not sure you have the Canadian experience that we need. He said, wait a second, I've just been living and working in Tokyo. Like, with all due respect to Toronto and Vancouver, you're not Tokyo. Yeah. And does that not have a value for you? And I've heard that repeatedly, and it saddens me. So we need to collectively realize that the experience you're all gaining is something we should try to either connect with if you stay there, or if you come back, really take advantage of. But first, so that's on us. We also have to help younger Canadians get out into the world. And sedentary isn't a bad word, because actually Canadians don't like to move, not just abroad, even within Canada. We don't like to move. There was a really embarrassing question in the 2016 StatsCan census that asked if you would be willing to move within your province, and the vast majority, if you needed work, like for a job, the majority of people said no. It's within your province for work, and the number one reason was family and friends. So we're a kind of a nesting people. We cocoon, some mixed metaphors there, but we like our cocoon, and that's wonderful in many ways. But like the butterfly that metamorphosizes, we need to leave the cocoon and then come back. So that I hope that message and inspiration is there for younger Canadians. We need to push this on campuses. We need to share experiences, saying, yeah, you can go to China, for instance, to work, but also to study. Like Canadians, the small number who study abroad tend to stick to like places, the U.S. coastal U.S. schools and Britain. It's kind of maybe a bit of France, INSEAD and the Sorbonne. That's kind of as exotic as it gets for Canada. I would love to see Canadian students in big numbers doing study terms in India, in China, in Nigeria. Really being forced to come to grips with very different cultures, ways of learning. And even if it's just for a term, it'd be great if it's for longer. But think of how transformative that would be for us as a country. But before it was Finland joining, not Finland, Norway. Before the EU was formed, Norway realized we need to be much more European. And we're only going to do that if we really force our young people to study in other European countries. So they created a whole system to get students. It didn't matter if you're trying to be a plumber or a doctor, to do a study term in Europe proper. And 25, 30 years later, it has had demonstrable positive impacts on trade, on movement, on investment, because there's now a whole generation that doesn't think twice about dealing with the Germans or Italians. It's just kind of they have a European instinct to them. We need to start to build that more ambitiously for Canadians.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. And that ratio of Chinese students inbound to Canada and Canadian students outbound to China is just abysmal, right? I mean, it's embarrassing. But as one in a previous life myself, I did an exchange program to Hong Kong. And you mentioned Finland. And I remember a Finnish friend who was getting paid like hundreds of euros a month in like support money just to go, and he was obviously his tuition was covered, but he was actually making money by going abroad to study. And he ended up staying there and working for a Finnish company, because when he left, he was given these resources, not only financial, but he was tied into the chamber and things like that that at the time I had not even really had on my radar. So he was just a very well equipped kind of global citizen before he even left home. And so I guess if you want to comment on that, great. But also, I'm thinking a lot about these. I'm thinking these days a lot about how do I engage with alumni networks over here of Chinese that have returned back to after studying in Canada and coming back to China. This is an incredible diaspora of people that are very, very Canadian in so many ways now.
Yeah.
Whether they identify as them or not, or whether they have passports or not, they've brought a little bit of Canada back with them. And so, activating them as well is something that I'd love to hear your thoughts on.
Yeah, that's a great question. And there was some really good thinking in a report that came out before COVID hit by Roland Paris, who was Trudeau's foreign policy advisor initially, and Margaret Biggs, who's a seasoned diplomat. And both are outside of government now, but they did a report on looking at this challenge of getting Canadian students to study abroad. And they recommended, putting serious money into this, which is something that Canadians are going to struggle with, because they're going to see this, there's a risk of it being seen as elitist. Why are we subsidizing, kids to go abroad? They should be investing in their own future. But you look around the world, and lots of countries do that with great effect. The Scandinavians, but Australia has always been good at this, at incentivizing young people. If you're under the age of 25, even travel abroad. You get support to do that, study or travel abroad. And you probably all know Australians. There's a walkabout culture that is just natural. You leave the island, big island, as soon as you can. Well, we're a bit of an island in Canada too, in the big broad world. So let's find ways to better nudge next gen Canadians to go on that walkabout. You asked about kind of activating networks, and that's a key part of the book, which I thought deeply about as I was working on the book, and really spent time with folks in Silicon Valley and elsewhere, coming to better understand the network effect. And Canadians, most of us think in analog terms. And that means when a Canadian leaves, we tend to think of it as a loss of one, back to this brain drain idea. So one person leaves, -1, we're down 1. And the network brain says, no, you're not down 1, you are up 10. Because that one person, Noah, you are going to connect us with 10 new people. So, okay, maybe we're down Noah, but we're gaining 10. So that's a net of 9. But then if we keep activating, we're up 100 and up 1,000. And it seems so simple. It's just the power of multiplication versus the cost or power of subtraction. And we need to think in multiplication, not in addition and subtraction, which is how kind of the tech brain works. And this is so essential for us as a country, because we're getting smaller. We're 40 million people, not even 40 million, in a world of 8 billion. We are not going to have the same relevance being 0.5% of the world's population that we did 50 years ago. Our share of everything, of population, of GDP, of defense spending, of development spending, is going to be smaller, and that's okay. This is because of the rise of the rest. But it means we need to, as a country, develop a bit more, I would argue, a bit more small power thinking rather than middle power thinking. And in some ways, I'd rather be a small power than a middle power, to be more like a Singapore or Israel, because you move more nimbly, but you think in networks, because you wake up every day realizing we are grossly outnumbered. Canadians should wake up, Canada should wake up every day saying, we are really badly outnumbered here, folks, like badly outnumbered. We need to do more than just come together and be Team Canada. We need to activate. And if we can activate those 2 million people like you on the line, we are no longer a country of 40 million. We become a country of 400 million because we're activating your networks, but also activating those alumni. So those now millions of graduates, or it will be in the millions, who over the last couple of decades have come here to study and go home. I'd like to see more of them stay here, but many go home, and that's all right too. But how do we keep them invested and connected in Canada? And China is such a huge opportunity in this front. There's a whole generation now in China of people who have studied in Canada. My God, they've survived, 2 to 4 Canadian winters. Like I'm afraid to go outside today in Toronto. Like we've trained them well as Canadians. Let's take advantage of that, because 20 years from now, who knows where our country's relationship will be, but odds are many of those people are going to be in the most senior ranks of government, of business, of social sectors, of communities across the country. We need to stay in touch, but also help them just it comes back to that people-to-people power. Be advocates for Canada and for Canadians. It doesn't happen overnight. It does not happen overnight. It takes kind of a generation of leaning in, and that's what Israel does. That's what Singapore does. That's what Taiwan does. They realized years ago, Taiwan lost a lot of people to the US, and they ran a campaign in the 80s to get people to move back. Once people are gone, they tend not to move back. The government of Taiwan realized, okay, we'll still try to get them to come back, but we're probably much smarter to connect with them wherever they are, and that's been a fairly good strategy for Taiwan. Canada, we have both a kind of a double power, working with the expats in your networks, but also working with alumni and their networks to kind of think more in that network, in that digital way rather than an analog way.
Yeah, well, I certainly like the sound of the math. I mean, John Stackhouse says I need to go out onto the streets of Beijing and make more friends. This is a good directive. I mean, you're absolutely right in terms of the outnumbered. I mean, a very common comparison that I think you even had in your book was that the population of Canada is effectively that of Greater Shanghai. And for us to wake up and be cognizant of that, on a daily basis is very important. I want to sneak a question in that we got from one of our listeners, who's actually a good friend in Hong Kong, but is currently stuck outside due to COVID, obviously. But he says, I find many Canadian companies are reluctant to look outside of their shoes, or risk averse. But after a year of planning, I'm often surprised by how many firms suddenly decide to expand into China and Asia. Do you see this period of mulling things over and risk aversion more a Canadian trait? And is this a positive, or do you think it's a hindrance to Canadian business? And I encourage you to answer that question, obviously, as you're in your experience as editor of ROB as well, right?
Yeah, this is one of our challenges as a country. We've lost a number of globally ambitious firms over the last 20 years, and need to come to grips with that coming out of this crisis. It's not just that international mindset that we're lacking in a lot of corporate Canada, but the investment flows that would go along with that. So how do we get Canadian firms, especially in sectors that we can be global leaders in, investing both their dollars, but their people in expanding internationally? So it's probably worth a whole other discussion, because plenty of people way smarter than me, from Dominic Barton to Tom Jenkins to most recently Monique Leroux, have led really smart groups of people to look at the broad sweep of so-called competitiveness issues. but this often comes up is that we're just not global enough in our business mindset.
Yeah, no, I'm really glad that you ended up answering my next question, because I did want to talk to you a bit about why there seems to be this kind of a disconnect between, you've got these incredible, you mentioned Ambassador Barton and Mr. Jenkins, et cetera, Eric Schmidt, we've got all these incredible Canadian executives all over the world, but none of them really seem to work for Canadian companies. And there are very there are seemingly very, not, I wouldn't say very few, but there are not as many opportunities to go abroad with a Canadian company as maybe there used to be. And you obviously engage a lot of Canadian companies. So is there something changing, or is that going to be something that we can continue to expect?
No, it's such a good observation, because when I was researching the book, I started to look at what one person called vectors of movement. What takes people out of the country, and in many countries, Korea and Japan, for instance, but the U.S. and Britain as well, a lot of their expats leave with their own multinational companies. You get promoted, you get transferred to a branch office, tested as a country manager in wherever, and you then move around the world with the company. We don't have that as much at all, really, as a people. We don't have international organizations that are really Canadian. So most of our expats leave on their own, which actually makes them stronger, because like many of you on this call, you got onto an airplane on your own. No one was sending you somewhere, and you got off the airplane probably not knowing a lot of people, and you carved out an opportunity for yourself in that nice Canadian way, and you built bridges, and that makes you really successful in whatever you do, because you're independent, you're trustworthy, you're a good bridge builder, and you're not part of a bigger organization. That's a strength for individuals, but a weakness in some ways for us as a country. Now, we're not going to suddenly have big Canadian multinationals overnight, but it's a really interesting challenge that you speak to, because a lot of Canadians leave and then they join a multinational in another country and then get promoted through the chain that way, the Deutsche Bank executive I referenced, and then they don't come back because suddenly they're moving up through a multinational company, more opportunities, and it's hard to come back because there just isn't the same opportunity necessarily in Canada. I don't have a good solution for that, other than to realize that there are networks of Canadians within pretty much every significant company out there, and we have to find ways to activate that more for Canada's benefit.
Yeah, certainly not an easy question to answer. I suppose if we had the answer, we'd have a lot of multinational companies out there hiring a lot of expats. But I did want to.
Well, one of the things we will need to do, if I can just add to that, coming out of the crisis, and I think there's more and more thinking about this, is to find ways to create, invest, and be demanding of Canadian champions. And that is something that we've kind of moved away from as a people, because it gets into governments picking winners, and we're going to end up with, I don't need to name names, but companies that seem to be favored and they become privileged. That's a risk always, but there's certainly enough examples, plenty around the world of governments, as well as national participants in the economy saying, okay, we're going to find a way to really dominate this sector, and we're going to have to help the companies in that sector. One that I've written about in my work at RBC is in agriculture, which is an area that we can, and I'm a high value agriculture and ag tech are areas where Canada has to really be a global leader, because the world needs more food and more sustainably produced food. We're going to have to be a leader in that. But also for our own interest, it's such a great growth opportunity. And I know Ambassador Barton is passionate about this, but that's an area where, as a country, we can't just say, hey, farmers or food company X, over to you. We have to think about how do we support them as being a Canadian champion, and which other countries do, say, like, what's it going to take for you to be top 5 in your sector? we're going to make it happen. And you know what, if you can't be top 5, then let's have another conversation about what you need to change to get there. So being more demanding on that front as well.
I think that's a fabulous approach, and the idea of appointing champions abroad is great. You have a terrific line in the book about Carney, Barton, and Evans as like the Iginla, Crosby, Nash Olympic forward line. But further to that, identifying areas where we really have competencies and complementarities. And when you talk about agriculture, I can't help but think about China. It's just such a strength for us, and something that makes so much sense between the two countries. I do want to sneak a couple more in before we let you go for the day. But one thing that I'd asked you about last night, and I'm curious to hear the answer to. We talked briefly about what some of the stories, the people, the themes that you ended up having to edit out of the book. So are there any surprises that you might be able to share with us, from the listener's perspective, who I'm sure many of us are going to end up picking this book up and devouring it as I did. But, is there anything that you had to edit out, or that you were unable to include, maybe you wanted to? Is there anything unique on that front?
Probably the most painful part was editing out stories of Canadians doing incredible things. There were just too many stories, and it was hard as a researcher. Every person I spoke to insisted I speak to 5 more people, and they were always fascinating conversations. And I realized I could spend the rest of my life doing this. I've got to stop the interviewing and start the writing. So that was the hardest part. And then in editing the book and shaping it, realizing, okay, this is an incredible story, but probably isn't going to work. And then also not getting to enough parts of the world. I'm pretty lucky. I've been to most parts of the world, but could happily spend years circling the world, meeting more and more Canadians. I think what it's in the book, so this wasn't cut out, but there are some frontier sectors that, like artificial intelligence, that I started to get more deeply into. So there's the Canadians that everyone knows in Hollywood. So I got to spend time with Jim Cameron, the movie director, and he's been out of the country 40 years and says, hey, I'm Canadian, and a great example, because he's not only probably the world's most successful filmmaker, he's a serious investor in agri-food, because he's vegan and is passionate about what some people call the protein revolution. And this is all in the public record. He's has invested in Saskatchewan because he believes that Canada can be at the center of this protein revolution, which he thinks the planet needs to survive, and is trying to, part of many people, one of many people who's investing in Canada's, but especially our prairie's ability to produce protein to feed the world much more sustainably. He thinks there's a ton of money to be made doing that, but it's also necessary for the planet, and feeding Asia of the 2020s and 2030s is part of that mindset. So here's kind of one of the world's most notable people, influential people, and a serious investor who's doing this on his own. And the kind of the drop ball on our part is, over the years, we haven't reached out to him and said, like, how do we work together on this? Because that would be a formidable force, and work with Canadians in Asia and on to be that kind of superpower of well-networked people. We're not a superpower as a country, never will be, but we can have that superpower as a people by connecting people. I saw that in all sorts of frontier sectors. It can be in sustainable food production, but also I mentioned artificial intelligence, where the deeper I got into it, whether in Silicon Valley or in the Oxford, Cambridge, London triangle, research triangle in the UK, there were Canadians like at every turn. In fact, the British government's AI advisor is Canadian. She's from Vancouver. And I thought, how'd that happen? And it happened because we have some of the world's best schools, and are developing AI talent in a fantastic way. That's going out to the world, often through grad schools or those multinational companies that I mentioned. That's okay. Like I don't begrudge that. Maybe we can get more to come back, but we also need to network them, because there's an AI race on now, particularly between the US and China. And Canada can have a special place in that field, not just connecting with schools and centers in those places, but through that network of Canadians who are literally kind of in the corridors of great thinking in AI, kind of everywhere I turned.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because, you know, as you tell that story, it certainly sounds a lot like the dreaded term brain drain, right? Where you've got these, you know, how did that happen kind of moments where we lose this, or quote unquote lose this Canadian to another institution or a multinational or what have you. And, you know, had it not been for this conversation, it might have been a very, you know, negative perspective, but it seems that you've kind of you're shaping it a little bit differently, obviously. And
we really have to be, sorry, no, I just want to, while we have a few minutes, is quickly make a point about that term brain drain, which I take on in the book, because I think it is one of those unfortunate expressions that gets us into a negative mindset about the power of Canadians in the world. To me, the location of a talented, committed Canadian is less important than what they're doing and what we as a people are doing to both help them and help them help us. So, Noah, like you may be more valuable to Canada where you are than you are here in Canada. A good friend of mine in Silicon Valley, who's been there for 30 years, made that very point in the book. He says, I am more valuable to Canada here than I would be in Toronto. And he's absolutely right. And the only thing that's missing in the equation is people in Canada calling him more often to say, how can you help us? Or how can we help you help us? And that's the mindset shift that we need as a country, to think more in terms of brain circulation. People go out, they come back, but they never stop being Canadian. And it's on us to ensure that all of you, wherever you are working day and night for Canada. There's great advantages to you being on Canadian soil to do that, but the opportunity isn't diminished if you're somewhere else. It's just a different challenge for all of us.
Yeah, contributing to the health and wealth and prosperity of Canadians does not need to be done in the borders. That's terrific, and I hope that our listeners tonight are going to walk away and not repeat brain drain and say brain circulation. I liked that a lot. That's good.
It doesn't rhyme, but
I certainly want to be cognizant of time, and I have one last question for you. And you've got 5 minutes to answer it, but to close it out, I wanted to know who do you, when I don't know if you have this thought when you're writing, but who do you feel like you wrote this book for? And if you don't have an answer for that necessarily, more specifically, maybe who do you hope will read this book, whether it's people in Canada or beyond?
No, it's a great question. I would say there's a few primary audiences that I was hoping to reach. Number one is Canadian youth. I really want younger Canadians to read the book or hear stories from it and be inspired to be more global with their lives, to leave the country in a positive way, come back as more internationally minded people, or stay abroad, but forever be Canadian and working, as I say, day and night for Canada's relevance and interests in the 2020s and 2030s. So I hope there's a range of stories in there that young people can say, hey, you don't need to be a Mark Carney or a Jim Cameron. You can be a Rafer Wallace, the architect in Shanghai who I profile, or Lindsay Miller, a design entrepreneur in Dubai, doing incredible things. People you've probably never heard of, but I wanted to profile to say that's the opportunity for us as a people. Secondly, I'm really hoping to influence policy thinkers, and have talked to a number of people in government, including the Senate committee about this recently, to help us constructively come to grips with this quiet challenge of us, but huge opportunity for us as a country. I spent a chapter looking at what other countries are doing, and I thought there'd be a few examples, and I was able to build a research team at the Monk School at U of T to help me with this. And they went through sort of the setup of dozens and dozens of countries that have a diaspora strategy and an expat strategy. We're one of the only countries, major or minor, that does not have a global strategy for its people. And it's such a great opportunity because we have those 2 million people out there. And yet in Ottawa, and this isn't a new idea, Liberal and Conservative governments have tried to come to grips with this. It gets pushed to the back burner for obvious reasons and fair reasons. But I'm hoping the book inspires some longer term thinkers in government to say, wait a second, if France can do this and India can do this in all sorts of creative ways by recognizing their global citizens, by bringing them back to help advise the government or advise business leadership, by incenting younger people to go abroad. If Australia and New Zealand can do that, if Israel and Singapore can do that, yeah, we can do that, and we must do that. So I hope the book sort of lights a few fires.
Oh, that's perfect. I think that's a terrific place. A quiet challenge, but a huge opportunity. I really like the way you put that. This was terrific, John. Thank you so much. For those of you listening, I hope that you'll have been inspired by this conversation to go out and to read Planet Canada. I know that we dove into it quite deeply tonight, but there's so much more to it. I can't recommend it enough. Testament to this, to how much I like this book was, it's the first and only one I've ever been able to actually read cover to cover on my iPhone. Due to COVID, I couldn't get a copy delivered in time for our talk, so I actually went through and read every page on the phone, and it was not as bad as I expected. But part of that is testament to the fact that it was such a well-written piece. So, our thanks at CCBC from all of our members. It goes out to you, John, for this contribution to the Canadian compendium and sharing your thoughts with us tonight / this morning. It's been such a pleasure, and I hope those of you listening will continue to keep your eyes on ccbc.com for more upcoming programming. But finally, again, to John and to all of you listening, thank you so much for being with us. Really, really appreciate it.
Great. Thank you so much, Noah, and thanks everyone for not only joining the call, but really working for Canada wherever you are. Thank you.
Excellent point to stop. All right. Thanks again, everybody. Have a good night and good day.